Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Frankly Speaking, and tonight we have with us Dr. V.K. Paul, the man we have many questions for, the man who has been spearheading India's fight back to COVID-19, the man who has seen us through the wave one, and the man who many have wanted to question in the second wave when we were in the throes of the second wave. But finally, Dr. Paul joining us here, right here on Frankly Speaking. Thank you, Dr. Paul, for joining me on Frankly Speaking. And पहले तो एक शेर से शुरू करना चाहती हूँ कि हम बहुत दिनों से आपसे रिक्वेस्ट कर रहे थे कि आप आइए, कुछ हमारे सवाल हैं, कुछ जनता के सवाल हैं, और इन सवालों के हमें जवाब चाहिए थे। और वो जैसे कहते हैं, बहुत देर की हुजूर आते आते, लेकिन अब आप आए हैं तो हमारे कई ऐसे सवाल हैं जिनका हम जवाब कई महीनों से तलाश रहे हैं, और उम्मीद करते हैं कि आज आप हर सवाल का जवाब देंगे।
नाविका जी, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। योर वेरी वार्म वर्ड्स आर वेरी एक्सिलरेटिंग। थैंक यू सो मच। आ नहीं सके, काम कर रहे हैं, जान लगा रहे हैं, मेहनत कर रहे हैं, लेकिन गुस्ताखी माफ़, but it is a pleasure and a true honor to be on your show.
Well, Dr. Paul, we are at this cusp where we just seem to have come out of the second wave, and already there are different worrying factors that are coming in. Statements of a third wave around the corner, statements about a Delta plus variant that's around the corner. Let me begin tonight by asking you the questions on how do you estimate the third wave? When is it likely to come, and how severe is it going to be? Is it even possible to predict this? Because you must have faced a lot of ire and anger from the people of India, given what we went through in the second half of April and the whole of May, really as far as the second wave was concerned, on why scientists couldn't predict either the timing or the extent of the second wave. Are we better positioned today to predict the third wave?
Navika ji, this virus is a worldwide phenomenon, and we have seen that this virus does come back in waves, and actually it fits into the epidemiological paradigm in the sense that it attacks people. And when it becomes difficult for the virus to find new people by way of increased distancing, by way of protection that individuals may enforce on themselves, and by way of the fact that susceptibility may change in a community and a lot of people are already infected, so virus finds it difficult to move on. Then it rests for a while until it finds another opportunity of susceptible people who are vulnerable for another attack from the virus, in the sense that once the situation in a society normalizes in terms of social contacting, in terms of laxity with regard to the mask wearing, for example, and reduced social distancing, then the virus comes back. This we have seen multiple waves in many countries. Japan, for example, has had 4 waves. US has had 3 and another small wave. But there are countries where even the second wave has not come. To me, if I understand the science of this and also the way the phenomenon takes place on scale, at population scale, in more than one way, to have another wave, whether second or the third or the fourth, is actually in our own hands, in the hands of people, in the hands of humanity, in the hands of citizens. And I say this with some degree of confidence. Remember, why does the virus have an outbreak? One, if the virus changes its behavior, it becomes smarter. That's the only factor which actually is out of our control. But the other 2 factors, namely the susceptibility and above all opportunities that we offer for this virus to expand its presence, is in our own hands. Susceptibility first. Vaccination is the best way to reduce your susceptibility. You are immune, you are protected, and the virus cannot pass through to other people through you. So that's ideal, and we are working in that direction. We can talk about that. We should talk about that. Natural infection again poses the same barrier. Virus cannot go on. But when I wear a mask, then again I'm reducing my susceptibility to catch this infection. This is in our own hands. And therefore, protecting yourself, ultimately virus enters through these passages, protecting ourselves with masks in particular and hygiene and maintaining distance therefore reduces susceptibility of the host. But then virus loves opportunities to spread. The opportunities are close contact, crowds, having parties, avoiding open spaces, even when you are inside. If it is a non-ventilated area, it predisposes mass gatherings, and so on and so forth. So virus loves people. It's a very, very social organism. And if we create those opportunities, if we don't protect ourselves, if we don't avoid those situations, the virus will come back. Now, conversely, if we protect ourselves individually, go for vaccinations, if we don't allow the virus to gain those opportunities of large gatherings, close contact, crowds, unnecessary going out, then the outbreak will not happen. We may have a small little simmering outbreak, which we can manage without having to overwhelm our health system. And that is an ideal situation till such time that vaccine-related immunity can be achieved at a high level. Therefore, I believe, yes, the virus's nature is to have waves. Virus has done this successively in many, many countries. But then we can prevent the next wave.
But Dr. Paul, I want to ask you, the second wave began with states like Maharashtra. From Maharashtra, it came, towards the center of Delhi. We saw Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Karnataka, the wave coming in that. You're talking about COVID-appropriate behavior and crowds gathering. Now, Maharashtra and Rajasthan had no elections. The elections were happening in West Bengal and Assam. But the wave was, second wave was growing in Maharashtra. The question is, why? Because the COVID-appropriate behavior was being sacrificed in the eastern part of the country. The second wave was beginning from the western part of the country. Doesn't seem to have a correlation with the basic theory of crowds creating this kind of multiplication of the virus. And therefore, I ask you the question once again. Did we fail in predicting the second wave in terms of its timing as well as its magnitude? And therefore, will we fail once again if and when the third wave comes? How have we learned from the second wave?
Well, you're talking about certain events which do create a situation for virus to transmit. But remember, in states that you're referring to, obviously there was a failure on the part of us as a whole for making sure that the virus transmission doesn't go out of control. The very fact that the pandemic was raging in a few states that you are referring to means that there were chains of transmission overwhelmingly going into tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, and our containment efforts were not in tune with it. And of course, there were the situation on the ground in bazaars and in towns was not disciplined at all. So we created those situations and continue to have those situations, not just in these two states, because this ultimately was a nationwide wave. If a particular region or a population was more disciplined, it would have not entered there. The point remains that the pure dynamics of the pandemic are such that when these situations of susceptible hosts and opportunities for the virus come together, situation worsens. But remember, there was an X factor, and the X factor was that there was a variant which was smarter than the previous variant. It had a higher transmissibility. Today we understand that phenomenon much better, that yes, indeed, the Delta variant, and just before that preceded by the Alpha variant, originally found in UK, were those variants which were smarter than the classical virus, the original virus. So when that came in, the situation worsened. Let me tell you about predictions that were made by people. You see, predicting second wave, it would come around this season, it would come, has been talked about several people. Those who study flu epidemics had predicted that this is around about the time when you should be very careful. And if you time it with the waves that happened in other countries, again, this was the critical period of time in a way. But then I said, it doesn't mean it has to come. It didn't come in many, many countries. But the predictions issue is, the short point about predictions is that global predictions by very, very eminent universities, whether it is IHME or it is Michigan or it is the UK Imperial College, nobody was predicting, or our own Sutra predictions by IIT Kanpur, the much talked about predictions. Nobody was predicting a wave which would go higher than the first wave. No way. It is only in mid-April, when in any case it was becoming obvious that the prediction points would rise and rise and rise. In March, nobody said that. In the first week of April, most predictions were saying it will be a wave just about the first wave or smaller than the first wave. It is only on the 15th of April, 20th of April, and 24th of April, and by that time anybody could see that there is a very severe growth. The short point is that we make use of the predictions to understand how the pandemic would go. But remember, no single modeling has been accurate in either predicting the first wave or the size of the first wave. You remember they were saying, 20 billion deaths kind of a scenario. Those were also the predictions, and some were very short in terms of the time period, and the whole wave will come like this. So remember, no system of prediction has been so accurate to be reliable. Overall, yes, we were passing through a vulnerable phase because susceptible people were getting together. A variant comes in, we lower the guard together as a society, and then the variant strikes.
So Dr. Paul, in March itself, the variant had been noticed that it was, somewhere in India. First it began in the United Kingdom, came over to India. It mutated a bit in India as well. But between March and April, possibly the extent and the magnitude was not realized. And then we saw a situation where we reached a level of 4 lakh plus cases per day, 4,000 deaths per day being reported, not enough hospital beds, the requirement of oxygen, which was new to this wave, the complete lack of preparedness as far as oxygen availability was concerned. On the one hand, Dr. Paul, I understand when you say it's difficult to pronounce the magnitude and not to create panic, it was being gently kind of pushed, the envelope was being pushed. But the manner in which things happened really did put the Aam Aadmi on the back foot at the receiving end, where even in cities, we had no idea where to get hospital beds from, concentrators from, oxygen from. We can't even begin to imagine what the situation in small towns and rural areas would be. What are the learnings, Dr. Paul? What would we do differently today in preparation for the third wave? Is something that's extremely important for people to know through transparent mechanisms, because that transparency, not just panic is not the only issue. Transparency also creates a sense of confidence on how to react to it. Last time around, people were caught unawares completely. This time, how can we prepare people for the third wave?
Much better preparedness is the key. Now we have learned from the previous wave 1, we have learned many, many lessons. Wave 2, we learned additional lessons. What is very critical is that we should not let our guard low. And above all, I want to emphasize that our containment strategies are the key. We cannot continue to we can have life which is moving on in a reasonable way, and yet the chains of transmission are contained. One of the critical areas of further improvement is to ensure that there is contact tracing. Those who are contacts are quarantined at home and they are supported. They are not to be moving around, because some of them are carrying the virus which will catch other people. If you do that, then you are preventing maybe 50 cases to become positive, 30 cases to become positive. Likewise, there is a big lesson that making micro-containment zones and keeping people who are infected in finite localities and ensuring that the protocols are followed is a very, very critical element. When you do this systematically, a need for a larger restriction or a lockdown or a district level lockdown would not be needed. So I think the lesson is suppress the chains of transmission, suppress the virus when it is on the retreat. And this is exactly the point now, because now we are dealing with finite number of cases. So I think the biggest lesson is the root cause has to be always being watched. And that root cause is to contain the virus in smaller localities. By the way, it doesn't make a difference, Navika ji, whether it is variant 1 or variant 2, whether it has transmissibility 1x or 3x, because the means to control, the toolkit that we have to control remains the same. I think this is a point which must be communicated, because it's important to understand what kind of an enemy we are dealing with, what weaponry this animal has. But what is the weaponry that we have? We have only 6 ways to tackle it. Those tools are the same for Wuhan virus or the alpha variant or the beta variant or the delta variant. Your point about, yes, transparency in regard to availability of beds, etc. These are the areas on which state governments have made their efforts, municipalities have made their effort, mega city organizations, mega city systems have made their effort. This must be more intensified. We must be ready to take an individual from home who seemingly now has a lower saturation to an appropriate location.
Dr. Paul, if you were a politician, I would have asked you this question, because you seem to be shifting the onus onto the states. If you were a politician, I would have asked you a political question कि सब सेंटर की तरफ देख रहे हैं, आप कह रहे हैं कि ट्रांसपेरेंसी स्टेट का जिम्मा है, आप कह रहे हैं अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ बेड्स, प्रेपरेशन, all that is states, healthcare facilities, states. I want to ask you, at the central level, when people's confidence gets shaken, and let's take the example of the Delta Plus variant. Now, you in a statement had clearly said that the Delta Plus variant is a virus of interest. The health ministry comes in, calls it a virus of concern, then it calls it a variant of interest, then it goes back, calls it a variant of concern, comes back and says variant of interest. There is a flip-flop, 4 flip-flops in the space of 60 to 90 minutes, and that's when people begin to wonder that, are we dealing with the scientific kind of transparency? Are we dealing with the situation where we are getting the real picture? Do our scientific researchers or the bureaucracy in the health ministry, are they giving us the real picture? What is it that we are dealing with? And it is here that transparency is so very important. Today, I want to know from you, is this a variant of interest, or is it a variance of concern? Is the Delta Plus growing at the rate that we saw the second wave? Is it going to impact children? These are issues common people are interested in, and when there are flip-flops in the health ministry itself, it definitely does not add to the confidence level of the people of India.
Now, Vikaji, I'll answer the 2 parts of the question that you raised. I want to come back to this issue of shifting responsibility that you mentioned, and I want to take it upon myself to respond. Remember, to address a pandemic-size colossal challenge, it is everybody's responsibility. Union government, state government, district administration, people at large, all stakeholders. It is a combined effort. It's a whole of nation, whole of society, and whole of government effort. There should not be doubts about it. When I gave you a couple of examples as to the availability of services, or for that matter, surveillance activities, would you please not appreciate the fact that this is implemented at the cutting edge in a district in J&K, in a district in rural Orissa, and in a district in Maharashtra, and so on. We must appreciate that the SOPs and approach to control pandemic, getting people along, preparing, it's a collective job. Union government has a profound and overarching responsibility to set the standards, to indicate which way to go, provide resources, help resources, take everybody along, and so on and so forth, and make technologies available, commodities available, oxygen available, and so on and so forth. So please, it is a shared responsibility. I went to a few examples to say that yes, when we are looking at transparency, it is a transparency at all the levels, including the union government, including a person like me who is playing a certain role. Yes, we should be transparent. And we are committed to that. I assure you that this is always to be taken as a shared responsibility. And when situation went the way it went, it was sad. It was sad, yes. We felt accountable to this. No question. I felt accountable. Certainly, because in spite of the best efforts, sincerest effort, sleepless nights, working, thinking through this new challenge about which everything is really not known, unpredictable enemy, invisible enemy. Yes, but then we have to face it and move on to do better and better. Now, in regard to the variant that you talked about, Navikaji, Delta variant, originally detected in Maharashtra, is clearly, now we know, rode this wave, pushed this wave. Just before this happened in April, Jan, Feb, around that time, it was the Alpha variant, particularly in Delhi and Punjab region. In this region, this is where it came and made a home. That part of the wave, earlier part, we may say, was the Alpha variant, the 117 variant. The Delta variant came in rather quickly because of its transmissibility, probably originated somewhere, we don't know where, but first detected in Maharashtra, as you know, and then it pushed the pandemic curve very, very ferociously, no doubt about it. And we now know today that it is highly transmissible. It is more transmissible than the Alpha variant found in UK, even higher than that. And UK had to face their second wave in the face of the Alpha variant, which is, in a way, in retrospect, less transmissible than the Delta. So Delta is now a problem, not only in this country, but at least in 80 other countries. In some countries, it is making producing a significant challenge. Having said that, on Delta Plus. Now, Delta Plus, on the problem of Delta and the change that this has brought about in the virus, there is an additional change related to the spike part. The spike is the part which gets connected to the human cells. If there are changes there and it makes this connect with human cell more easy, more ready, more intense, that's a risky business. So the change that it has brought about is also the change that was seen in the Beta variant, which is the one that was found first in Africa. And therefore, it is of concern that could this be the reason for its future transmissibility or adverse effect. As of now, what do we understand? As of now, we know the following, that we have detected about 40 odd cases through our genomic surveillance system. These are spread in about 10 states. Delta Plus has also been found in some other countries. Today, it is not possible for us to say that Delta Plus variant is a variant associated with increased transmissibility. We do not know. Is it associated with neutralizing the effect of the vaccines? The answer is we do not know. Is it associated with higher severe disease, incidence of severe disease or death? The answer is we do not know. What we also know a little bit is that it tends to neutralize the effect of monoclonal antibodies from a study that has been done in some other country. In other words, please give science a little more time. We only have 40 such strains in the entire country today. So now the connections have to be made with clinical data, epidemiological data, and therefore this is a variant of interest, variant of investigation. As yet, it will not be proper to call it a variant of concern, which moves to an entity category where we believe that that variant and those variants are associated with increased transmissibility or worsening of the disease or changing the vaccine susceptibility or diagnostic paradigm.
Dr. Paul, you're the scientist, you're the expert, we don't know better. I can't challenge you on that. But when you say it's a variant of interest and there is a flip-flop in the health ministry, I want to ask you, does that not spread the panic that you want to prevent? And number two, what is the accountability? Kabhi concern, kabhi interest, kabhi concern, kabhi interest. Is this not adding to the, let's say, a complete confounding situation that we are, that the normal common man does not understand all this. He only understands that he's suffered a lot in the second wave and now there is some new variant that has come. Should his life come to a standstill? There are children. Will they be impacted? Will schools ever reopen? Will colleges ever reopen? Will we ever go to our workspaces? Can we ever expect business to come back to normal given the fact that there are so many fears that exist? Can we expect jobs really to begin? Because every decision of life is based on what's going to happen in terms of this pandemic. And when we have these flip-flops from the health ministry, it doesn't really help matters at all. And there is no accountability, and that angers people because Austria, New Zealand, Ecuador, countries like that have shown accountability. There have been people at senior levels who have put in their papers because they haven't handled the situation. Here we move from variant of interest to variant of concern, and we go back to interest, and we don't give any explanation to anybody, and the common man is none the wiser.
Now, Vikaji, when the science is talked in general public, please appreciate we tend to use scientific terminology. At times there can be a communication gap in explaining the nuances of these terminologies optimally, and please accept that could happen. But remember, the message that we wish to give, at least the message that I want to give, and we have given it in our press conferences as well, that please, yes, we keep a watch. Having a variant, even if it is a variant of concern, tomorrow there will be another variant of concern, yet another variant of concern. This will go on till we have this battle with this damn virus. But remember, the response to this, whether on the part of people, society, or the government, the rules and the framework remains the same. We must continue to have discipline, and we must have determination to address the chains of transmission, to contain this, to have optimum testing, to have preparedness, to enforce COVID appropriate behavior and scale up vaccination as quickly as we can. I agree with you. These questions are in the minds of people. We are duty bound to explain them. For example, you are asking a very fundamental question. Can we go back to schools? Can the industry function optimally in near future? The answer to that broadly is that for some time to come, this will be a compromised state in terms of normal life. Normal life to return would take a few more months. And the only definite way for us is to reach reasonable coverage of vaccination and to continue to, again, put pressure on the chains of transmission so that the virus remains at a low level, at a simmering level, what we may call as an endemic level, so that we can handle it on the side. But yes, for some time to come, we are going to be living with this virus, and therefore discipline, some compromise in our lifestyle, some compromise in our individual behavior, some compromise of our individual behavior for the sake of other people. For example, if I am exposed, I should stay at home and not expose other people. I am duty bound to do that. And therefore, that situation will go on for some time. Opening of schools, opening of industry will come in future.
Dr. Paul, January, Pfizer was very much part of the applicant wanting approvals in India. They withdrew. And all sorts of stories and surmises were being made on why they withdrew at that time. There were questions being raised about why we haven't gone abroad, why are we waiting for so long, why there isn't enough transparency when we increase the dosage period from 12 to 16 weeks from the earlier 6 to 8 weeks, different points of views of scientists. The question still being, did we waste time, number one, and can we meet our targets, number two? Let me ask you on the vaccination front. On the vaccination front, we have Covaxin, efficacy around 77-78%. We have the Oxford AstraZeneca, which is called Covishield, lower than the AstraZeneca efficacy that has been demonstrated abroad. We have the Pfizer Moderna vaccinations, which are 94 to 95% efficacy. These don't exist so far in India. Have we miscalculated our vaccination policy in the past? The kind of indenting that we should have done with regard to how other countries have operated. We are at, I think, 18%, whereas there are countries which are close to 80% in terms of their populations ready with intended vaccinations. And of course, the fact that we opened it up for the 18 to 44 age group without the supplies being in place and pushing it on to the states to do the procurement, when frankly there was no infrastructure to do that and companies abroad were not even entertaining them. Have we again miscalculated our strategy there?
Time will tell that our approach to our vaccination coverage, production, implementation will be seen as a role model example. I'll tell you why. Firstly, we are fortunate to have on our soil a plethora or a basket of vaccines available to us. We are currently dealing with 3 vaccines. 3, Sputnik also is there to an extent and it will scale up. We have Covaxin, a homegrown vaccine, and you mentioned AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine. 3 other vaccines are on the cusp, not too far, including cadilizidus, including Novavax, which will be called Covavax, and also BioE, another homegrown vaccine. And then we have vaccines in waiting, so to say, which include the Genova mRNA vaccine and also the Bharat Biotech nasal vaccine out there. So remember, there is a basket of vaccines available in this country, and the eventual production and availability of these vaccines is tremendous. It's tremendous. It's enough to cover our nation and also perhaps eventually also cover other parts of the world. Often this point is made that why we did not go for booking the other vaccines. Remember, the major players decided first and foremost to provide vaccines to their own countries of origin. Look at Pfizer, look at Moderna. These are the 2 main players. AstraZeneca, in any case, we are part of their supply chain. And Johnson & Johnson have other problems. Again, we are part of the J&J stockpile system. I'll come to that in a minute. In fact, I should add that as a 9th vaccine because it will be developed it will be produced in Hyderabad in BioE factory very soon. So there are 9 vaccines potentially, 3, then 3, another 3. But the 2 famous vaccines, they emanated from USA and had partnership in Europe, and large part of their stockpile they pre-committed to those. I'll give you an example of booking these orders. Canada booked something like 140 million doses. This is something like 5 times of the doses that they required. But by March, only 6 million doses were available against an order of 22 million from Moderna and 74 million from Pfizer. The point I'm making is that this notional order placing is actually a myth that has been created. Total stockpile per annum currently available in the world is limited. Even these major companies are looking at 700 million doses and 130 million, and now of course ramping up. And the ramping up has taken their own schedules are lined up over a period of time. Coming to India, you appreciate that we had these two vaccines, and companies are moving forward with escalating their production. We are hand-holding them. We are hand-holding other companies as well, including those companies that are now going to develop Covaxin in partnership and through tech transfer of Bharat Biotech. These are 3 PSUs and 1 Gujarat Consortium, another system, who will be putting in Covaxin creating facilities. We have supported nasal vaccine to the tune of almost 100 crores. We have supported Genova for another 115 odd crore rupees. Total of 670 odd crore rupees have been given to the companies that are making vaccine one way or the other. There is a tech transfer from ICMR, there is a tech transfer from DBT. Laboratories of DBT are available for assays. DBT has more than 10 sites where clinical trials are happened. They are being funded by the DBT. Regulatory processes have been eased out in a very significant way. They are hastened. So there is an all-round support to the vaccines being produced in our country, and manufacturing capacity in the country will rise. Yes, there is a phase in first quarter where the vaccine availability is relatively less compared to what potential need is, but we have secured more than 50 crore doses going up to July. Beyond July, August to December, there is already an order placed for 30 crore doses with BioE in anticipation, order placed for 19 crore doses with Bharat Biotech, 25 crore doses with Serum Institute. And then additional order will now be placed according to the new guidelines, where the union government will pick up the part that would have gone to the state governments. And in addition, we are hoping that Covax will be available to an extent. We are also working with other internationally available vaccines, including Pfizer and Moderna and J&J, because now we know that they have some capability to provide such doses to our nation. We are working very closely with them, and we hope that part of the stockpile going into future will be available. The other question which is often asked is, why did we not give orders to our own people? Navika ji, we're working with our own companies as a partnership on a daily, on a weekly basis. Their stockpile is visible to us. Their stockpile is for India, except a few commitments that a particular company had made. And we were offered assistance, money, which I mentioned, went to other companies, also offered to them. And Bharat also received it for their nasal vaccine and for their experiments, and also for expanding their facility now in Bangalore. Serum also was helped through support for their clinical trials. Sputnik was helped, and so on. So this partnership meant that the stockpile visible to us and produced on the soil of India was always and continues to be available first and foremost for our own program.
Well, Dr. Paul, January, Pfizer was very much part of the applicant wanting approvals in India. They withdrew, and all sorts of stories and surmises were being made on why they withdrew at that time. There were questions being raised about why we haven't gone abroad, why are we waiting for so long, why there isn't enough transparency when we increase the dosage period from 12 to 16 weeks from the earlier 6 to 8 weeks, different points of views of scientists. All of that has led to some amount of questioning on the lack of transparency of the processes, number one, and number two, of the availability. And now that from 21st of June, we've started the free vaccine dosage that has come in with the center starting a new cycle of vaccination. We're talking about 1 crore of vaccines per day. We're first day somewhere around 90 lakhs. Then it's tapered down to 60 and around 50 lakhs. The question still being, did we waste time, number one, and can we meet our targets, number two?
When did we waste the time? We are working to produce vaccines and to reach out to obtain vaccines from international system from April onwards, the government constituted a national task force for vaccination and other technology in April. We were working with academia to find opportunities such as the ICMR found to have a vaccine candidate from their laboratory, which was then handed over to Bharat Biotech way back in April, May. And the work started at that time. It is at that time that engagement happened with the companies such as Zydus to look at a totally new technology to create a vaccine. Similarly, a hand-holding for Sputnik started somewhere around October.
April, May of
as soon as such an
2020
offer
or
came,
21?
systematically, on a daily basis. 2020, ma'am. 2020, of course 2020. April, May 2020, ICMR passes on that virus candidates to Bharat Biotech to start developing. And this is to be noted. How many countries are in a position to think about 8 vaccines being or 9 vaccines being available as on a platter? Please understand these things take time. Now, first quarter, is I think very promising and quite good because we are still, the second highest number of vaccine doses having been delivered. If you assume China is higher than us, but the fact remains that yes, it is that hard work which is now paying us. In terms of transparency question that you raised, I wonder what aspect of transparency is really not been done. Our process of deciding the scientific principles of vaccination is determined by National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization. It's a group of people which has independent scientists. They take decision. The government doesn't take decision as government. This decision is taken by scientists. It's a well-oiled and highly respected, highly credible system which has stood the test of time of universal immunization program. The world looks upon our INTAGI as a role model INTAGI. WHO respects it so immensely.
Yes, we know there are pressures on you, but you also need to understand that there is anxiety amongst the human race, given the fact that this is a new entity they are dealing with. They don't know what's going on. All they know is that the heavy price they have to pay in terms of illnesses and lives, that are lost. And in that, I want to ask a couple of quick questions, Dr. Paul. Number one, when will you extend the vaccination cover to children? Number one. Do you think there is a balance between urban and rural vaccination strategies now that, it's not just through CoWIN but through direct registration? And the third, has India underreported deaths due to this pandemic? 3 quick questions that I want to ask you.
Well, let me pick up the second question first. Second question is in regard to the spread of vaccination in the country. This is being tracked systematically, particularly from May, early May. 53% of vaccinations have taken place in rural areas overall. On the day when the record was created, on that day, 66% of the vaccination took place in rural areas. In fact, overall, our tribal areas have shown a coverage which is higher than the national average. 126 odd districts out of 178 demonstrate a higher level of coverage compared to tribal districts, compared to the national average. 71% of typical centers are located in rural areas. And yes, as we move further, we must be enhancing this reach even further. But we are used to doing it. Every year there are 90 lakh UIP sessions that are held across the country, and overwhelming proportion of these are truly in the rural areas. The government, the state government, district administration, health authorities, they know how to conduct these sessions in the community. So I think there is no concern in this regard. It's only once the availability increases, there will be further and further spread, and every person will be reached. We can assure you that. Also, the point with regard to the pediatric vaccination on this, please remember, even today, I believe there is no recommendation from World Health Organization. Yes, a few countries have gone ahead and included children up to 12 years for vaccination because they found certain vaccines to be effective based on their data. So the condition for us to move forward is to find a vaccine, find a set of vaccines which would work on children, because safety in children is very important to be ensured. And typically, when you develop vaccines, you always start with adults and only then subject children, so that there is no undue risk for the growing body of the child. We have two vaccines, Covaxin under trial for children. The cadilazidus vaccine, which is yet to find the licensure, already includes children as a subset, and therefore the data would be available for children. So those two vaccines are being, shall we say, tested for use in children. Two other vaccines, we believe Covovax should be subjected to childhood vaccination program and efficacy, and I have had a word with Adar Poonawalla that should be a priority. And likewise, BioE vaccine, the subunit new vaccine that will come, we are encouraging them to simultaneously start the pediatric trial as well. We have more confidence to now go for pediatric trials, knowing from the overall experience. So the first part of the answer is that we need to have a vaccine which is safe in children. The second part is that when we do it, we would like to have a strategy which can cover a significant proportion of children. Children between 18 to 12 are about 13 crore children, and that vaccine is therefore to be a portion for them. Also, generally it is believed that the illness in children is minimal, although they are path of the virus spread, but the risk of serious disease is negligible, thank God for it. But yes, children will have to be eventually covered because they form part of the herd immunity cohort that eventually is necessary for breaking the chains of transmission. Your question about the underestimation of deaths, I think this will be answered in due course as we move along, because in addition to the current system of estimating deaths related to COVID-19, which means a special surveillance system that the Government of India has instituted, where cases that are positive are tracked for their outcome and they are reported on a daily basis as a daily bulletin. That's one system. But in addition, we have additional system of CRS system, of civil registration system, which is also a government system, by the way. And that government system is a bottom-up system, except that it covers only 25% of all deaths in the country, or roughly around that. And from that system, information will come. That information should be looked at. There are SOPs to interpret the findings, and those findings will be looked in totality and matched with other numbers. That's a government system. It's not a system which is outside the system. And this is there precisely because true estimates of the mortality and what underlies these mortalities is there. In addition, there is also the sample registration system which is available. Eventually, that will also provide data in this regard. So let the data appear. Let's not be conjectural on it. Yes, we can visualize that there could be deaths that occurred before a diagnosis by RT-PCR has been made. It is possible, and some adjustments of that nature would come, and these numbers will be harmonized.
Well, we do hope foreign publications will also wait for that data to come in, because their headlines already ready. But before I let you go, Dr. Paul, one last question I want to ask you on a personal note. Did you, Dr. Paul, at any stage felt overwhelmed by the situation in the second wave that was unfolding before your own eyes, and the growing anger from the people of India? Did that impact you, affect you in any which manner?
Well, as I said a short while ago, yes, this the situation going in an astronomical way, rapidly, ferociously, and the stress that it put on our society. Yes, indeed, it was saddening. It was very deeply distressing. There is no doubt. And so that's one reflection that I had, and it It made me, feel accountable for my responsibility. But it also made me further sad because, some things that I would personally communicate in interactions at the press briefings or wherever I got an opportunity or through the media was to continue to appeal for discipline, augmenting, the appeals by the Prime Minister, by others. And one would, say that why did we have so many of us breaking that discipline? What would make me feel sad, because that is definitely a way to contain this pandemic to a certain limit. So that made me sad for sure. But then the third feeling is of resolve. These challenges will come in this pandemic. Other nations have experienced, other nations with much stronger health systems have experienced. We will fight it out, and therefore wake up in the morning and work even harder for the role that has been assigned to me, whether it is vaccination, coordination, talking to the state governments, looking at testing, looking at the need for containment, need for educating people, raising the morale in own way. And yes, a mix of feelings, but then this is an unusual situation. It is an unusual challenge, and the nation will fight it out. Corona harega, desh jeetega.
Well, thank you. Well, that's the hope we all carry in our heart, a hope and a prayer. Thank you very much, Dr. Paul, for joining me on Frankly Speaking, and I do hope we will get an opportunity to ask you several more questions given the paucity of time. We hope we'll make that happen sooner than later. Thank you, Dr. Paul, for joining me.